Hello, I'm Gary Greenwald, and today we're back with Phil Phillips, my special guest from Texas. Phil's a young man who's done an expose on occultic cartoons and toys that have come into our stores. Also, he's dealt with a lot of the comic books that are actually programming our children for witchcraft and the occult. And I asked Phil earlier how we got into this area, and he said that way back in the days of Ken and Barbie dolls, when there was a humanism coming into all of the different toys that were made, we began to move this direction. And I thought maybe we would start out today by looking at Ken and Barbie. I mean, who would think anything could be wrong with Ken and Barbie? But let's look at it from that aspect. Ken, or Phil, what is it about Ken and Barbie here?
Well, obviously, looking at the two, they're perfect American dream type people. You know, Barbie is absolutely perfect. Perfect body, perfect hair, perfect clothes, perfect car, perfect house. And she has a perfect boyfriend who's also the absolute image, you know, that she has the clothes, the house, the car, everything material about them. It just flows right along. Mm-hmm. And Dr. James Dawson puts it this way: Barbie has absolutely no blemishes except for Made in Hong Kong stamped on her rear end.
Right.
And but there's someone who's a little more emotionally involved with Ken and Barbie than either me or Dr. James Dobson, and that would be Bill Barton. Now, most people don't know who Bill Barton is, but Bill Barton was the co-designer of Barbie. In a recent interview with Newsweek magazine, he contributed the current outbreak of anorexia nervosa, the self-imposed starvation syndrome, to the popularity of Barbie in the late 50s and early 60s.
Is that right?
Yes.
And you mean the children were actually getting involved? Little girls would see Barbie being so perfect, so slender, and their reaction would be, I've got to be like her, so they'd start starving themselves.
Yes, this man said that this doll creates unreal beauty expectations in little girls, and he has never given one of these dolls to any of his granddaughters.
That's how much he believes in this.
Yes.
And she is a perfectly made little girl, and this is where there's a little danger in the Ken and Barbie dolls.
Well, Barbie perfectly okay for early adolescent teenager, but that's not who plays with them. It's young little girls, and they should be playing with soft mothering type dolls, learning mothering qualities instead of learning fashion and
well, of course,
that type of thing at that age.
We're not going to say that there's anything really wrong with these dolls, except that every doll a child plays with conditions him to vicariously live his life through that doll. And what was that statement you made earlier, that God spoke to you and said what dolls would do?
Well, children project themselves with their imagination into toys to give them life, character, abilities, and talents, and they set the surrounding around it. You see, toys are symbols.
Yes.
That guide children through different situations, and these symbols set the stage for their qualitative judgments later on in life.
Well, let's go from there. We're talking about humanistic type of toys. Let's go into the more blatantly occultic things.
Yes.
I remember a couple years ago I preached a message for television called Dungeons and Dragons, and in it I dealt with the occultic overtones, the witchcraft, the demonism, the spells that were perpetrated through the game Dungeons and Dragons, and I felt at the time that children were identifying so closely with those little pieces in the game that we even had newspaper clippings of children that had dropped out. Some they thought had even committed suicide because of the game, yeah. And even more has come to light since then. And I wanted to show a clip from Dungeons and Dragons right now showing the occultic overtones of the game. So here's from the cartoon show that's now come from the game. Here it is, Dungeons and Dragons.
Excellent. Soon the repairs will be completed, and your work will be done now for. Your ship shall make me more powerful than ever. Well, what is it?
The lost children have been spotted in the forest nearby, with dungeon masters, young ones.
Good. Now we can eliminate them all.
No!
What?
If you harm those children, I will work no more.
Is that so?
Your threats mean little to me, Venger.
As you wish. Shadow Demon, see that they are captured and bring them to me.
But...
Go, and do not harm them.
Well, Phil, we've been watching a character here called Venger and another black creature called Shadow Keeper. What do they represent to you?
Well, I believe that it's a direct depiction of Satan and his demon powers and demon friends that go forth for him. I believe that Dungeons and Dragons is a direct quote from the pit of hell, if you want to call it that. It is a mind-bending game, a mind-changing game. It is involved with all kinds of occult and pagan religion. The player's handbook includes over 160 pages of spells to be cast.
Let's look at one of the handbooks here. This is the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, the Monster Manual, and it's full of monstrous figures and actually those creatures that the children can imagine. And
yes.
Children's imaginations are very active, aren't they?
Yes, very much so.
Now let's look at another one of these. This is where we go into the Dungeon Master's Guide. Who is the Dungeon Master?
Well, the Dungeon Master is a person who plays God in the game. And he controls all the situations. In fact, the books tell him that he is the God of the game. And he controls the situations in the game, controls the way the players are moving through the dungeons, and then if he doesn't like someone, he can play pretty much against them.
Do you think parents are aware that when the children play the game that demon spirits are involved?
I do not think that many parents are aware of what's inside the game. In fact, in my presentation, I show many pictures from the inside of the books just to show the images of this game. I mean, the gruesomeness of this game and the occult link to it.
Well, I know that when I did my message, and this has happened, I have letter after letter where people took the pieces. Now, there's sixes involved in the pieces of the game, but they'd take the pieces of the game, they would throw them in the incinerator or the fireplace, and screams would come out because there seemed to be some kind of spiritual forces inhabiting those pieces, and children would drop out of life. They didn't want to study anymore. What are the pieces, for instance?
Well, this game affects the most intelligent of our children. And the pieces include white witches, wizards, necromancers, the clerics, that type of thing. It includes evil wizards. It's a white versus black witchcraft. The good versus evil is white versus black witchcraft. And Anton LaVey, the writer of the Satanist Bible, says there is no such thing as white witchcraft.
Well, being a Satan worshiper, he should know.
Yeah, he should know that all power from Satan is going to create evil and havoc. And what it shows is it shows a good versus evil, that good has about the same equality of power as evil, and they come head on in collision, where that's not the outline we see in the Bible. We see a good that is all-powerful, that has taken dominion of the world, that created the world.
Yes.
And we see Satan, who's been defeated.
Absolutely. And that's what we want our children to know, that Jesus is greater than Satan. He has won all the way. He's the conqueror. Now, let me read you one quick letter here. The cassette, this is a letter that came from a lady that had heard my cassette on Dungeons and Dragons, and she just mentions how it changed the personality of her young boy. She says, the cassette from the Eagle's Nest especially helped me with my boy who was involved with D&D at a private high school which promoted D&D as part of their attractive strategic game club. She says, for a period of about 6 months, we lost Tonio, our son. He became rebellious, disrespectful, lethargic. He made sneering faces at us and carried with him a very hostile spirit that could be felt wherever he went in the house. After much sorrow, Tonio finally let go of D&D, only after his father forbid the game as his day's pastime. He couldn't make it his day's pastime. She said he had put aside all studies for this game. Now, I want to say that the reason the danger comes into this is that not only is it a game now, but the cartoons, which the children even identify more strongly with, are now coming up with D&D cartoons of the occult. Let's see another segment of a D&D cartoon where there's blatant occultism and witchcraft. Here's the cartoon.